This is womensleadershipsuccess.com radio, episode number 83. May I ask you a personal question? Are there circumstances or choices you've made that have you stuck? Do you need some encouragement to take more risks? Or maybe want to control your life and career? If not, do you have a friend or coworker that might need inspiration? Our special guest today says every day, every age is the right day and the right age to direct your destiny. Are you ready? Set? Let's go.
Welcome to Women's Leadership Podcast, showing you how to influence people, improve your performance, and advance your career. Brought to you by women's leadership and career expert Sabrina Brahm and womensleadershipsuccess.com. Here's your chance to meet women trendsetters leading the way to success, accomplishment, and balance in business and life. No matter if you're a manager, CEO, or entrepreneur, join Sabrina for coaching and no-nonsense advice to improve your career and bottom line.
This is womensleadershipsuccess.com radio with Sabrina Brahm and our guest, Susan Combs. She served as the Texas State Controller from 2007 to 2015, where she pushed through reforms in state government spending. Previously, she served as Texas Agricultural Commissioner and in the Texas State Legislature. She has also served as an Assistant District Attorney in Dallas, Texas. She's written a great book called Texas Tenacity, a call for women to direct their own destiny. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks, Sabrina. Glad to be on.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, basically, I was raised in a ranching family. My great-grandfather started ranching out in the sort of high desert area of Texas, and then I went off to college and worked in New York for 6 years, various things, and then came back home, went to law school, was a prosecutor, and then joined my dad in the ranching operation about 35 years ago, and that was great, learned a lot. And then people suggested, well, gee, I moved to Austin, the state capital, why don't you start going to hearings and things at the state capitol? And from there on, it just kind of built up, as you said, Sabrina. I became these were all elected positions. I was elected to the legislature, and then as Agriculture Commissioner, the first woman to be so elected, and then tax collector, treasurer, revenue estimator, sort of the CFO for the state. And now I'm working on my women's effort.
Wow, that's so wonderful. And I just want to commend you for going into public service. You know, we need more women to do that. That's wonderful that you've spent so much time doing that. And now, I'm sorry, go ahead and make a comment about that.
Yes, Sabrina, I don't think I would have done that had I not lived at the state capitol. I've worried a lot about women not getting into politics, and in some cases it's because the main place where the office is held, let's say the state capitol, is not where they live. And so that makes a difference.
That really makes a lot of sense. And you said you've started doing things to help women. You've founded an organization called Herdacity. What's that about?
What it is, it actually is a 501c4 called the Anywhere Woman's Project, and that was that a woman's place is anywhere she wants it to be. Well, that's kind of a mouthful, so we decided to call it Herdacity, which is a contraction of the two words her and audacity, where women will dare to be the person they want to be, not fulfill somebody else's expectations. And so we're in the sort of final phase of our software development and hope to do a full launch. We'll do a soft launch in March. We'll hope to do a full launch early April, and we want women to come onto the website and meet other women and sort of, progressively get more daring, which is sort of the stronger word to use rather than empowered, more daring to fulfill their personal goals and dreams.
Beautiful, and that's herdacity.com.
No, it's org.
Oh, excuse me, herdacity.org. Great. And so how did your book come about? What made you decide to write your book?
Well, I was talking to these young women. They said, oh, that's an incredible story. That's a funny story. Listen, why don't you all write this down? And I thought, well, I'll write a book if I believe that, in fact, maybe the book, along with Herdacity, tells people sort of like, I didn't start to get to point Z. I went from A to B and B to C, and then it was a long sort of on and off escalators, on and off various paths, life. And I thought maybe that will remind other people it's not, your life isn't necessarily very linear.
I think that's a great thing to tell people. So many times, especially younger women, think that they've got to do things in a linear way. It's great to hear that.
Yeah, and had 3 kids, and each changed to our family circumstance. The next kid, in some cases, I after a conversation with my oldest son, I abbreviated my day work schedule by getting home at 3:00 so I could be there after school. I mean, I made the choices that were the best for me and my family, while also trying to balance work, and that is the very tough thing for anybody. And for those who don't have kids, they have other challenges. Everybody has challenges with their particular life circumstance.
That is so true. The title, Texas Tenacity, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think I have a peculiarly Texas perspective on things, but what I tried to describe in the book is certain things where I just had to be remarkably tenacious, bullheaded, dogged, determined, and I don't recollect facing adverse consequences because I was a girl or a woman. I faced closed doors because somebody didn't want me to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided if I wanted to achieve my goal, I would have to be tenacious.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, relentlessly tenacious about getting there, but it might require me to have a whole new set of strategies, a whole new set of buddies and allies, and I learned a lot about getting things done when doors were shut. It was very, very useful.
I want to just go right to that, what you're saying there, because I think so many times women, even myself, when you hit an obstacle and you're not successful, you feel defeated or discouraged. And what did you do to overcome that? Where okay, you tried really hard to do something and the doors slammed in your face. What did you do so you got more tenacious?
I think the entire determining factor for me was how strongly did I feel about the goal? Was it something I felt was a core mission for me, or was it just something I would like? If it was just something I would like, I would say, okay, I'm not going to waste my time thinking about it. If it was a core mission, I would do anything and everything I could to get it accomplished. And so in the book, I talk about 2 particular things. One was about children's nutrition. The other one was about telling taxpayers where their money went.
Mm-hmm.
And in both cases, I had, every conceivable door was shut. And I got kind of hacked off about it, which also was very helpful. I mean, I described my first chapter that I got pissed off, and that's very effective rocket fuel. But also, I had a sort of a high purpose. I thought it was critically important to a group outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think being able to think about somebody else besides me enabled me to be more persistent, more determined, because I was trying to save or help somebody else. And that is pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. I find that I do coaching in corporations, and I find women have trouble promoting themselves. And if they can frame it that they're going to be helping all the people that work for them, it makes it easier for them to do. So I agree with what you're saying. Think outside yourself. How's this going to help big picture? Mm-hmm. You also mentioned that you had 30 minutes, watching 30 minutes of TV changed your life, which I got a giggle out of. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. I was living in New York, and I was working for the federal government downtown at Foley Plaza, and it was okay. But, I mean, I just couldn't see anything happening. Well, there was this show called Maude, and B. Arthur was sort of the gravelly-voiced, centerpiece of the short drama. And there was a high school reunion, and Maude's yearbook and all of her past was she was going to be most destined to succeed, Maude the famous, Maude the fabulous. Well, Maude was sort of 40, fading, and beached, as I use the word in life, and in flies Bunny. And she'd been, I think, my recollection, she'd been named Bunny because she had buck teeth. Well, she was now this gorgeous actress, and she had her own airplane, and she was incredibly accomplished. And I looked at Maud, whom everybody was kind of terrified of, and then here comes Bunny, and I sort of termed that to myself, and I thought, oh, my goodness, you've turned into Maud. I was like 27.
Mm-hmm.
So the next morning I called and signed up for the law school admission test, and I thought, I am on a path to become Maud if I don't do something right now, and it was great. Never looked back.
I love it. I love it. And I think what you're saying is so important to know no matter what age you are. If you're 27 or 47 or 57, the reality is you're going to get older whether you do something or not. So you might as well get into gear and do something, right?
Yes, and also be attuned to messages from outside. I mean, that show, I was just slack-jawed watching this, and so somebody might say something to you, and it will be so penetrating, and you will think that is an epiphany, that is an eye-opening, mind-bending experience.
Mm-hmm.
So not just that you're going to keep marching down life's path, but be open to a new perspective. Be willing to accept some kind of risk. I didn't know whether I was going to pass the LSAT or not, but I knew I doggone for sure was not going to sit there doing what I was not going to rot in place where I was.
Beautiful. You also say in your book, you say each one of us possesses some secret skill, some strength, some trait that we may not even recognize that can help us achieve our dreams and focus our aspirations. Do you have some suggestions for how somebody can begin to notice those?
Yeah, I think you have to turn a very analytical eye on where you've been and some circumstances you've been in. Go back and pretend you're watching Mary Smith, whom you don't know. What did Mary do in that meeting, that conversation, that you actually think is pretty nifty? If you talk about yourself, you know what I mean? We don't want to say we're great, but assign Mary Smith this thing that you just did. You say, why, I think Mary handled that brilliantly. And so, your new avatar is Mary Smith, and you step back and you say, well, when the waiter threw the iced tea all over me, how did I handle that in the restaurant? Well, I didn't punch him out, which is, of course, a great improvement. But I did whatever it was I did. Separate you, who you think you are, from whom you are, by applying a lens that says, you know what, you should be happy with what you did in that circumstance, and encapsulate that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a trait you have, or you are always the person that everybody says, I am so glad that Sabrina came. Boy, she calmed everybody down. She made everybody feel better. There is something unique to each of us that we're so reluctant to, talk about our own brilliant charms, but we need to because they help us direct our next steps.
Beautiful. And also paying attention to what other people tell you about yourself. What do they say you're great at?
Yes, because we don't see ourselves the way they do. The classic thing is if you look in the mirror, the right side of your face looks very different in the mirror than it does in real life. And we look different. And so a friend of mine was going through some struggles, and she said, she was going to a therapist, and she said the therapist said to her, ask all of your friends to say 3 things that they believe are true about you.
I think that's beautiful.
My gosh, she got we all said you're vulnerable, but you take risks, and that you care about people. That was, wow, vulnerable, take risks, care about people. This woman had risked lots of different jobs, but she was vulnerable. But boy, she was still willing to take those risks and move ahead. It helped her. It helped her on her next path.
Beautiful. You also talk about opportunity holds out its hand, and we have to reach for it.
Yep.
And you said sometimes our grasp falls short, and we have to back up and reach again. You kind of talked about that before, but how can we notice the opportunities?
Well, I'll give you an example, and sometimes we don't even recognize it's an opportunity. Somebody says, well, why don't you go apply for a job? Well, I don't think I can do that. Well, go ahead and try it. That's one kind. Another kind was if there was a circumstance out on the ranch and there was a problem about a transmission line right of way, et cetera, and I had zero background in electricity, electric transmission, regulatory environment, et cetera. But basically, there was this opportunity which turned into a necessity that a couple of us just had to start thinking about it. And so we were facing huge, well-funded law firms, and this was about our own particular ranches. And so the opportunity for me, which I didn't recognize at the time, to learn something entirely different, to see myself in a completely different way, was going ahead and dealing with this particular transmission line. That, I guess what I would wrap that up into another phrase and say that events can show you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Even if would not have, looking back as I sort of deconstructed it, I didn't realize I could do what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that I could do it until I got through the door and looked back.
Right. I think that's so beautiful, and I can think of that in my own experience. Part of it is just being willing to show up and do what you can do, even if you don't know all the answers to it. And you may be surprised at how much you accomplish just by doing that.
And so let's suppose you find you stub your toe, you're halfway through this project. Well, that doesn't mean don't reach out a hand ever in the future. It means figure out where you stubbed your toe, figure out how not to do that, and then keep your hand out, keep reaching. It's sort of like coming back to Maud.
Mm-hmm.
If I hadn't reached out to take that LSAT, where would I be today? I have no idea. But it seemed like, okay, I'll spend the $80 or $40, whatever it was. I'll go. It's in 2 weeks. I had to cram like crazy, and I aced it. But I didn't know I was going to ace it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you keep reaching. That's where we women have not been trained, I don't think, to be risk takers. Watch out, you'll skin your knee. Don't fall off your bicycle. Whereas the little boy, we expect the little boy to have his, he's fallen in a mud pool and look like the Dickens.
Mm-hmm.
We're not supposed to. And so we're trained not to accept risk, from 18 months old.
Yeah, I think that's good. I have somebody that I'm working with who has a time period in her resume where she wasn't working, and this has become a big block for her. She feels really embarrassed, like, well, what is everybody going to say? And they're not going to hire me because I didn't work for these 2 years. What would you?
Did something she wasn't, in a time capsule. She did something.
Exactly.
And what she has to do is step back and say, well, what did I do for 2 years? Myrtle, whatever her name is, I may have decided that I wanted to get off into the nonprofit world and I wanted to go help. I had 5 separate projects that I wanted to do. And I wanted to go be more involved with my family. Whatever it is, she did not waste her time.
Right. So she can just put that down on her resume.
Yes, but she made a deliberate step. She did something. In some force, she applied her own decision-making to, I'm going to do something different here. If she lost her job, and if she couldn't find another job, she has got to put that with a bow on it and say, I was so lucky to have these 2 years to do A, B, and C. They changed my life, and they will have changed her life.
I love it. I love it. And I think that a lot of people listening to this are really going to get a lot out of what you just said. And I wanted to ask you, in your book, you talk about you were physically abused. Would you mind sharing that story with us? And let me just tell you, the reason I would like you to share it is that 1 out of every 4 women is in a relationship where she's being abused, and I don't think there's enough. I don't think people say publicly that they've had this experience and give people encouragement that they can have something different happening. Would you mind sharing that story?
Of course. Yeah, I got into a bad first marriage because I didn't think I was worth more. And so I was willing to sort of accept the first guy that sort of came down the pike, as they say. Then it sort of just morphed into him getting really crazy. I mean, literally crazy, had to be committed to a hospital. But I didn't tell any family member or any friend. I was mortified. Love that old word. It's just a horrible old word. Embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anybody. I had picked him, so I made his behavior my fault. If I hadn't picked him, this wouldn't have happened. Well, that's crazy. That's nonsense. Finally, it got to the point he was slamming my head on the stairs. I thought he was going to break my neck, and I knew one of us was going to die. Either I was going to try to fight back or he was going to kill me. I literally ran for my life from my father's house. We'd been staying there for a day in San Antonio, and I grabbed the car keys and left barefooted. Had my purse, didn't have a suitcase, didn't have anything, just ran for my life literally. Never went back. So a couple of lessons I learned from that. One is there is always somebody who will take you in, always. This was a high school friend, but it may be your church. It may be you pound on the door of a neighbor 3 blocks away. There's somebody who will help you. Number 2, we want to help each other. And so what I did was that when I left, I decided I couldn't go back. It was the right decision to do, and we ended our marriage a couple of months later. But you have to not wait and be embarrassed. Start talking to somebody that you trust, that will not betray you, will not rat you out to the abuser, and you can start making an exit plan. And when I handled all these child abuse cases when I was an assistant DA, I saw instance after instance after instance where women themselves got abused or they allowed their child to be abused. And so they felt powerless, and there are, sort of social systems in place, but they're oftentimes not very effective. I still think that a personal family friend or your church or, synagogue, someplace where you feel that you have a faith basis or a fellow Rotarian or whatever, people want to help. If there's a cry for help, they want to respond. And I am always so impressed with the capacity for our, fellow humans to care and love about us.
And to not be ashamed that it's happened, but just start taking the steps to get out of this.
And then, from my own experience, this was, in a horrible way, a very important learning experience for me. I learned a lot about other people, about how to help other people, about how to deal with these child abuse cases. It certainly made me, I think, a more effective advocate. So the fact that I wasn't permanently harmed, which was lucky. I mean, there are people who I saw had, collarbones broken and all kinds of stuff. I didn't. But I learned a lot. And so my life, in a weird way, is better for that horrible experience.
And it sounds like it's my philosophy. It sounds like it's yours, too, that whatever happens to you, you're going to find a way to learn something from it so you can move on and make the best of your life.
Absolutely. There is never a permanent lemon that does not go and make some lemonade. I mean, I'm dead serious about that. There's always something good that comes out of it.
Beautiful. We're running out of time, but I want to ask you a couple more questions. You say for women to just ask for the raise. Well, for lots of women, this is super difficult to do. Any suggestions?
Yeah, and I think what you have to do is you have to script it out, and you've got to play act with other people, and so it's a kind of it's kind of like this a cookie. There's this sweet part where you start out. I mean, this is actually works for everybody. Everybody loves to be endlessly flattered. We're just social creatures. So at least I would say the supervisor. I just want to tell you how much I enjoy working with you. I've learned so much. I am learning so much. Present tense. Don't slip to the past. And you've taught me to do A, B, and C, whatever those things are. And say, I think I love the work. I love the hard work, and I'm ready to kind of take that next step and that next raise. And so here's what I'm proposing. I would like you to think about giving me a raise that is X% in Y circumstances, and it depends on where you work. Some, governmental city, counties, et cetera, they have, 3%, 5%, so you're sort of locked in. Other places in the private sector have a little more freedom, but you start with praise, you talk about yourself second, and then you close back up with the praise and say, and if they don't give you the raise, you say, well, I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like the opportunity to come back and talk with you in 3 to 4 months and see if there are some things that I have done that actually make that more likely, because I so much appreciate working with you. I like being here, and I want to know how I can improve to get that raise.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. And I've had other people on the show that have talked about how to ask for a raise, and this was 5-star. This was just really, really good. I loved it. So we're just... Go ahead.
If you make it all about them, who can resist being charmed?
Right. Exactly. So we're just about out of time, and I'm wondering what other encouragement would you like to give to the women listening?
Well, I would say you really can survive just about anything, and being sort of tenacious does pay off. And I would also say we all have various kinds of fear. Just take your fear out and put it on the table and look at it as though it's a foreign object, and ask yourself, well, what if? Oh, is that what's going to happen? Well, that's not so bad. And then you find out the fear thing shrinks and gets smaller and smaller. Well, I can do that. It's not so scary. But the less we look at it, the less we talk to it and think about it, it gets bigger. And so you've got to shrink it, and that way you move forward.
Beautiful. Well, to my audience, if you want to be inspired and amused by Susan Combs, be sure and read her book, Texas Tenacity. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
I hope you like this show. If you did, I would really appreciate your help. I need more great reviews in iTunes or Stitcher.com, because every great interview we get allows more women like you to discover the show and will help them to succeed too. Please visit iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe to Women's Leadership Success podcast. Also, I really appreciate you sharing my show with your friends and associates. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining your host, Sabrina Brahm, on another Women's Leadership podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can email her at sabrina@sabrinabrahm.com. Since 1989, Sabrina and her team have helped hundreds of women managers, business leaders, and entrepreneurs with valuable trainings, articles, books, and executive coaching. For additional tips, interviews, and free access to Great Leaders Today mini course, visit www.womensleadershipsuccess.com.